Well, as some of you know, several years ago I traveled to Russia to teach in a pastor's training school, and I decided that a fun way to break the ice with the Russian students would be to open each class session with a joke. And I tailored the jokes to introduce the Russian students to and have a little bit of fun at the expense of Americans from the state of Indiana. And so, for instance, I told them, and maybe you've heard this one, I told them about a guy who went into his doctor's office, and he says, "Doc, something's really wrong with me. I hurt everywhere." Doctor says, "Wow, that is unusual. Where all do you hurt?" And the guy says, "Oh, I hurt. Oh, ow, that hurts." Doctor's like, "Wow, that sounds bad. Where else do you hurt?" "I hurt. Oh, ow, that really hurts there too." And doctor's like, "Okay, where else?" "I hurt. Oh, that's really painful." And, this goes on for a while. He's working his way down, "Oh, I hurt. Oh, that really hurt." The doctor's like, wait a minute. "Are you a Hoosier?" The guy says, "Yes, I am." "Why?" Doctor says, "I know what's wrong. You've got a broken finger." All right, you think about that one for a while. The Russians loved my jokes because I'm funny. But moreover, this is what makes it funny. As it would turn out, the Russian word "huzha" means something to the effect of, "Wow, this is even worse." And so the Russians concluded that Indiana must have been settled by Russians who escaped, the Soviet Union, settled in the state of Indiana, and concluded, "Oh, Huzha, this is even worse." So they love laughing at Hoosiers. Thought we're like long-lost relatives or something like that. So the point is, they began to tell me Russian jokes, and this is one of those. So a Russian man is also in pain. He goes to see his doctor. It's pain in his feet. And the doctor takes one look at him and says, "This is your problem. It's your boots. Those boots are horrible boots. They're worn out. They give no support to your feet, and they're about 4 sizes too small for you. No wonder you're in pain in your feet. This is all you need to do. You just need to get a decent pair of new boots that actually fit your feet." The Russian man says, "Doc, I can't do that." Doctor's like, "Why not?" He says, "Doc, you need to understand, every morning of my life, I wake up in the same old miserable bed. I get up, I get dressed in the same old miserable clothes. I go eat the same old miserable breakfast with the same old miserable wife and my same old miserable family. And I go out the door and head out to the same old miserable job. I come home at the end of a long day to the same old miserable house. And all I have to look forward to, the only happiness I have in my life, is when, at the end of the day, I take off these boots." Russians are very dark. Very dark. So here's the simple punchline of all that introduction. Sometimes the decisions that we need to make our lives go better, sometimes they're not rocket science kinds of decisions. Often they're no-brainers. They should be as obvious to us as a bad pair of boots. But you know what? Sometimes we miss those obvious decisions in our own lives. It's hard to see those obvious, no-brain, this is not a rocket science kind of decision for our own lives. Anybody want to admit that? It's easy to everybody around us to say, "Well, dummy, just do this." Like, "Oh, I didn't see that one." Right? We miss the obvious decision. And I think maybe often, like the Russian man, we miss the obvious good decision because we have the reasons that we use to convince ourselves that making the same bad decision over and over again is the right decision to make. You know what I'm saying? The payoffs of continuing to make bad decisions seems to, in our mind, outweigh whatever pains and inconveniences might come along with the obvious good decision. So you might be able to identify with this. The pain of being in a bad relationship outweighs the pain of just not being in any relationship at all. Does that make sense? There's an obvious decision. Just stop dating losers. Can I say that? Is that unchristian-like? No? Okay. Preach it. All right. But we miss the no boot, bad boot kind of thing because we convince ourselves that a bad relationship is better than no relationship. We convince ourselves and we make the bad decision because we think that the payoff of bailing out on my marriage outweighs the pain of just growing up in my marriage. Or the payoff of caving in to something that's got a grip on my life. It's got a hook in my heart. Some sort of addiction. The payoff of caving into that thing outweighs the pain of saying no. The pain of resistance. All right, so sometimes the decisions we need to make, in order for our lives to get better, they should be as obvious to us as a bad pair of boots. And this isn't just common sense. This is a biblical truth. We've been looking at this introductory passage as the truth to our Live the 10 Commandments, or Live the 10 message series. Here's the biblical truth. Life goes better when we live according to God's principles. Life goes better when we make the obvious choice of doing life God's way. God's pretty smart. And so life goes well when we tap into His wisdom and just do what He says. So Deuteronomy 12:28 puts it this way. Let's read this together. Be careful to obey all my commands so that all will go well with you and your children after you, because you will be doing what is good and pleasing to the Lord your God. And so life goes well when we do life God's way, when we obey His commandment. Life goes well for us. Life goes well for our families, for our children. Life goes well for the people around us. And why is this a no-brainer kind of thing? Because when we do life God's way, we're doing what is good. We're doing what is pleasing. This is not rocket science. And so this morning we're going to continue in our Live the 10 message series in which we're exploring how to live the 10, how to pattern our lives after the principles God laid forward for us, His wisdom as embodied in the 10 Commandments. And I'm going to very quickly just review the walkaways that we've looked at from the previous 2 weeks. So let's read this together. From first week, commandment number 1, here's the principle number 1. Let's read this. Life goes well when I put Jesus first. Life goes well when I put Jesus first. Principle number 2, life goes well when I keep Jesus first. I'm not going to take time to review those. If you missed them, you can go on to our... what's the thing you click on the internet? Website. You can go onto our website thingy. It's on there. All right. Here's the third principle. It comes from, Exodus 27 is where we get our third principle. Let's read this together too, as long as we're in the reading mood. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. For the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. That's the third commandment. Now, how many of you, here's audience participation, like me, grew up in a house where this commandment meant, next slide, thou shalt not cuss. All right? And like poor Ralphie here, you had a mom who scrubbed those cuss words out of your mouth with a bar of soap. Anybody grow up in a house like that? All right, some of you. I did. How many of you grew up in homes where, cuss words were just they were adjectives and adverbs and nouns and verbs, just a very normal part of everyday conversation? Okay. I guess the rest of you have never talked or something in your house. We just never said anything. All right. All right, here's the shocker. This is the news flash for some of you. The third commandment, taking the Lord's name in vain, has nothing to do with cussing. This commandment is not about cussing. Okay? That might be a shocker for some of you. But before you go out and start adding a bunch of blankety blanks to your vocabulary, you should know that there are a lot of other Bible passages that talk about the way we talk. as followers of Jesus. A lot of Bible passages instruct us that we need to keep an eye on our lips, which sounds funny. We need to keep an eye on our lips. We need to keep an eye on the words that are coming out of our mouth. We see that in passages such as Ephesians 4:29, which reads, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." And so this is really a much broader instruction to the words of the Christ follower. This is not merely, hey, there's about 6 words you shouldn't say, or 8, or whatever it is. I think George Carlin actually counted them at one time. Those of you who are old enough to remember what that meant. All right, so this is a much broader thing. Hey, let no unwholesome talk. Right? Let no unwholesome talk, except that which is benefiting for the moment. It builds people up. So the Bible does, in fact, repeatedly instruct us as Christ followers, hey, let's watch what we're saying. But commandment number 3 doesn't say that. There's good passages that say watch your speech. Commandment 3 is not really about that. You follow me? I guess that's making sense. Move on? Okay, we're good to move on. In other words, I'm not moving on. When God says, hey, here's the top 10. Here's the most important things. He did not say that the top 3 most important things are put me first in your life, keep me first in your life, and don't say some bad words. Those aren't the big agenda items on God's concern for our life. Listen to this very carefully. You could live the whole of your life and never even begin to utter one syllable of even a single cuss word, and you could still have missed number 3 completely. You could still have been, with your whole life, having never uttered even a syllable of a cuss word, you could still have been a violator of number 3 in the worst way. And the stakes are really high on this one, because when we look at verse 7 again, we see there's a lot at stake for missing number 3. It says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. The Lord will not leave the person who violates commandment number 3 without guilt, without blame. He will not leave him unpunished. And you need to know, by the way, that commandment number 3 is the only one of the 10 that has a punishment stipulated with it. You know, there's a little bit that Sheldon talked about last week in number 2, but number 3 is the only one that says do this, or don't do this, rather, or else. So as I was studying for this passage, I found myself asking the question, well, I wonder what the or else is on this. I wonder what the punishment is. You know, is the Lord, like, if we take his name in vain, is he going to wash our mouths out with soap? Or is it like, I mean, how bad is number 3, right? And so I studied everything I could find. I looked at all the Bible references that I thought would explain what's at stake here. What's the punishment? There was nothing in the Bible that really made it clear this is what's at stake. And so I read commentaries, everything I could get my hand on, honestly, studying for this to try to figure out what is the punishment here. No one, this is how desperate it was. I even Googled the internet. You know, that's like the dregs of sermon research. Nobody had anything to say on this other than to repeat what the passage says. If you take the Lord's name in vain, he will punish it. But what's he going to do? All right. So this is the best I've got for you this morning. I'm not going to make it any more clear. We don't know. We're never told anywhere what the punishment God has in mind here. We only know that whatever it is, God makes this promise. I will not allow vain naming, whatever that means. I will not allow vain naming to go unpunished. I will not hold the violator innocent. I will not hold him guiltless. In other words, God says to us, when you take my name in vain, whatever that means, we're still going to unpack it. When you take my name in vain, I can't let that one go. Do you hear that? I can't let that one go. I will not leave it unpunished. So whatever it means, whatever the punishment is that's at stake here, it doesn't sound good. God's promised, I won't let it go. So I would suggest that for us, the important question is not, well, could it be worth the risk? What's at stake here? The important question, or actually the important decision, the obvious, bad boots, this is not rocket science decision is, well, let's just not find out. You get that? Let's just obey number 3. And so we're going to spend the rest of our time this morning exploring, well, if Commandment 3 is not about cussing, what is it about? If God is so serious about this and it's important for us to make this obvious no-brainer kind of decision, then we better figure out what it is. And so this is the big idea. This is step 1 in our journey this morning. The big idea that I'm going to unpack for you this morning is life goes better when I take God seriously. Let's read that together. Life goes better when I take God seriously. And so we're going to spend the rest of our time unpacking why that is the big idea behind number 3. And we're going to look at 3 ways that this big idea is unpacked for us actually in the Bible. The Bible spins this in 3 different ways. Right? And we're going to look at those 3 different ways this morning. So first of all, taking God seriously means taking God's reputation seriously. Taking God seriously means taking God's reputation seriously. Where does that come from? Well, there's 3 simple, just interpretive observations that we need to make when we're unpacking the words of Exodus 27. All right, first of all, and you can follow this in your notes, the word take means carry, to bear, to lift up. It's the exact same verb that's used of carrying a shield. You lift up, you carry, you bear the shield. All right? That's the first understanding. Secondly, the word name here, when used of God, the name of God, it means more than just the pronunciation of the letters that form the sound of his name. It means more than taking the name, meaning God or Jesus, Lord. It's more than just the pronunciation of the words. When the Bible references the name of God, it means his essence, his character, his personality, his attributes, everything about who he is, his reputation. In other words, and it's really not any different in the English language, when we say something to the effect of, you have sullied my good name. We don't mean you got dirt on the letters that pronounce the sound Kent. Right? That's not what we mean. We obviously mean, no, you have sullied my good name means you have done damage to my reputation. And that is the same sense of the word name, not only here in Exodus 27, but throughout Scripture. Name means reputation. Thirdly, quick observation, the word vain means empty. It means meaningless. It means worthless. It means false. It means deceptive. And so when we combine that all together, taking the name of the Lord in vain, listen to this carefully, means bearing the reputation of God. Carrying the name of God, the reputation of God in empty or worthless or meaningless or even worse, false. Carrying the reputation of God in false or deceptive ways. And God says, this is number 3. Put me first, keep me first, and bear my name in a way that gives me honor. Because when somebody bears my name in a false way, in a deceptive way, in an empty way, in a meaningless way, God says, I can't let that go. I won't let that go. Look at Ezekiel 36. Here we catch a deeper glimpse of God's passion for his name, his passion for his reputation as it's being carried by people who allegedly walk carrying that reputation of that name. So picking up in verse 17, Ezekiel 36, we hear God speaking to the prophet Ezekiel. And this is what he says. Son of man, when the people of Israel, when my people, called by my name, when the people of Israel were living in their own land, they defiled it by the evil way they lived. And to me, their conduct was as unclean as a woman's menstrual cloth. That's pretty nasty language from God. They polluted the land with murder and the worship of idols. Those are number 5 and number 2. By the way. And God says, so I poured out my fury on them. I didn't let it go. I couldn't let it go. They're sullying my name. I scattered them to many lands to punish them for the evil way that they had lived. When my people make my name like a dirty menstrual cloth, I can't let that go. In verse 20, but when I punished them, when they were scattered among the nations, even there, they brought shame on my holy name, on my holy reputation. And for the nations, meaning all these other countries around Israel, they said, these are the people of the Lord, but he couldn't keep them safe in their own land. In other words, as the people around the people of God are watching the people of God make his name and his reputation like a dirty menstrual cloth, they say, wow, their God's a loser. Their God's a stinky God. That's the observation they're making. So verse 21, God said, then I was concerned for my reputation, my holy name, on which my people brought shame among the nations. Therefore, prophet Ezekiel, give the people of Israel this message from the sovereign Lord. I am bringing you back, but not because you deserve it. I'm doing it to protect my name. I'm doing it to protect my reputation, which you are dragging through the dirt. See, this is just another way of saying, I'm not going to let you keep getting away with this. This has got to stop. Where am I? Halfway through 22. I'm doing it to protect my holy reputation on which you brought shame while you were scattered among the nations. I will show how holy my great name is. The name, the reputation on which you brought shame among the nations. And when I reveal my holiness through you before their very eyes, says the sovereign Lord, then the nations will know that I am the Lord. When the people of God bear the name of God in a way that makes his reputation great, people say, I want to know that God whose name you carry. But when we make his name like a dirty menstrual cloth, the people around us say, your God stinks. Jesus stinks. You give Jesus a bad name. You understand that? That's commandment number 3. Take God seriously. Take God's reputation seriously. And as followers of Jesus Christ, as those who bear the name of Jesus Christ on the decisions we make, on even the words we speak, we need to carry that reputation seriously. We need to carry the reputation of Jesus soberly, because the Lord says to us, when you give me a bad name, I can't let it go. I can't let that go. It's got to stop. Understood? That's number 1. Second, taking God seriously means taking God's presence seriously. Steve? Taking God seriously means taking God's presence seriously, Steve. And this is really just another facet of lifting up the name of God. Just lifting up the name of God in meaningless ways, in false ways, in empty ways. Steve. Literally, it's talking about calling out the name of God, but not intending, Steve, to call upon the person of God, Steve. Does that make sense? Taking the Lord's name in vain, Steve, is just like calling out the word God without intending to invoke the presence, the person of God, Steve. And why would the Lord say, listen, I'm not going to put up with that, Steve? Why would he say, when you call upon me to no end, when you call upon me with no intention, with no meaning, emptyless, when it's a meaningless invocation of my presence, Steve, and that's not really what you mean, when it's a false invocation of my presence, I'm not going to let it go. Why is that a big deal to God, Steve? Well, the obvious answer here is because calling out the Lord's name for no reason, to no end, is no different for him than it is for Steve or Steve. It's no different for him. It's like, what? What? Oh. You get that? Except the difference between the Lord and Steve is the Lord hears every single utterance. Anytime, anywhere, hears every single utterance. We see this truth in Psalm 145:18. Listen to these words. The Lord is near to all who call upon him. He is near to all who call upon him. And so when you call upon the name of the Lord, you are calling upon the presence of the Lord. You are invoking the person of the Lord. The Lord is near to all who call upon him. And so when we say, oh, God, yes, I'm here. Oh, dear Lord. Yes, I'm here. Oh, I see. You didn't mean it. See that? You didn't mean it. You're just calling my name. You're invoking my word, but you're not invoking my person. You're not invoking my presence. And verse 18 then goes on to say why this is a bad thing. He says, the Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth, meaning not in vain, but those who call upon him in sincerity, not falsely. So when he shows up and he says, oh, you called my name in vain. You didn't mean it. This was empty. You called upon me to no end. God says, I'm not going to show up. The Lord's presence is near to those who call upon him in truth. But when we don't mean it, the Lord is not near to that person. Let's look at Psalm 24, 3 and 4 to look at another, twist on this. And you need to understand, by the way, that this verse in the middle of it, these verses, verse 4 is almost an exact parallel to Exodus 27, commandment number 3. The phraseology is almost identical. All right, so listen to these words. You're going to see the importance of calling upon the name of the Lord and intending to invoke the presence of the Lord, and why it's a bad thing to call upon the Lord, but not meaning to invoke his person, his presence. That's the point we're making here. So Psalm 24, verses 3 and 4, who may ascend into the hill of the Lord, and who may stand in his holy place? In other words, the question is being asked, who can be in God's presence? Who can hang with God? Who can dwell and live with him? The answer is in verse 4. He who has clean hands and a pure heart, and who has not lifted. Any guess as to what's the word here is? It's the same word, lift. Carry, to bear, to take the name of the Lord in vain. It's the exact same word here. Who can dwell in God's presence? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. He who has not bared or carried up his soul to falsehood. Underline the word falsehood. Exact same word as vanity. So the language here is precisely the same. Who is it who lives in God's presence? He who doesn't bear up his soul to no end. Without meaning, in a false or deceptive way, I have invoked not the presence of God, not the person of God. I have just said the word. That's not the person who's going to live in the presence of God. Another passage. Right? So I guess you get the point there. Let me kind of pull the string of continuity through that. If we just call on the name of the Lord in just a vacuous, empty, and even false and deceptive way, God says, I can't let that go. That person will not dwell with me. The person will not walk in my presence. I'll quit showing up for that. And there's another quick reference we could look at in Acts 19, the 7 sons of Sceva. As you know, these were individuals who weren't walking in relationship with the presence and the person of the Lord, but they were just trying to invoke the Lord's name. They were just trying to invoke God's words. They were just trying to invoke God's power without invoking the presence or the person of God. And in so doing, what happened? Well, things just went badly, right? Yeah, because God didn't show up to back it up. Why? Because it's just like, no, you are breaking number 3. You are just trying to incant. You're just like trying to practice Christian magic. You're saying Christian words, you're saying Christian names, and you're trying to, cause the power of God to go out, manipulate my power without being in relationship with my person. And you know what? I don't like that. As a matter of fact, I can't let you get away with that. So Exodus 27, number 3, God says, the person who vacuously and meaninglessly calls upon me to no end. Those who make just these light, flippant appeals to my name. They incant my name. They incant my words. They try to incant my power without invoking my person, without invoking my presence. I can't let that go. That person I will not draw near to. That person will not dwell in my holy presence. That's point 2. Taking God seriously means taking God's presence seriously. Number 3, finally, taking God seriously means taking your promises seriously. Taking God seriously means, for me, take my promises seriously. This, by the way, is just the oldest interpretation of the third commandment. Going back to Old Testament times, the rabbinical commentaries, even biblical explanations of Exodus 23, the third commandment, or 27, the third commandment, I'll take this particular gloss on the third commandment. In other words, the oldest commentaries say this: the words, "Do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain," means do not swear an oath in God's name unless you mean it. That's the oldest interpretation of the third commandment. Do not make an oath by God's name if you don't mean it. Because if you do, God says, I'm not going to let that go. Okay? So just to show you that I'm not making that up, Jesus, years later, of course, he's preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and in the Sermon on the Mount, he's really doing this running rabbinical commentary on the 10 Commandments in various places. And so this is what he has to say when he gets to number 3. Matthew 5, 33 and 37. Now you have also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. So Jesus very clearly understood this is what this is about. Number 3 is about taking God's reputation seriously by keeping your vows, making your vows seriously. Our ancestors were told you must not break your vows, you must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But Jesus goes on to say in verse 34, but I say to you, I'm going to trump this. I'm going to give you the fuller meaning of number 3. I say to you, do not make any vows. Well, that's interesting. Does Jesus mean Don't make any promises? Don't do it. Just stop making promises altogether? No. No. It's not what Jesus means. He goes on to explain what he means. So do not make any vows. In other words, do not say by heaven, I swear it by heaven. He says, because heaven is God's throne. Who are you to swear by heaven? That's the implication here. And do not say by the earth, I swear it by the earth. Jesus is saying, well, the earth is God's footstool. Why are you swearing by that? Don't do that. And do not say by Jerusalem, I swear by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great king. And don't even say, I swear it by my head. For what does it even mean? You can't even turn one hair on your head black or white. This is what number 3 means. So says Jesus. Just say a simple yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything else beyond this is from the evil one. So Jesus was not saying, hey, don't make any oaths at all. Don't make any oaths at all. He was just addressing the practice of people weaseling their way out of promises, weaseling their way out of oaths by saying, oh, yeah, well, sorry that you're disappointed. I didn't swear by heaven. Sorry I didn't do what I promised you I was going to do. I didn't swear by the earth. All right, they were weaseling, they were dragging God's reputation into their bad habits of not keeping their promises. And Jesus was saying, stop that. The Father will not let you get away with it. I'm not saying don't make any oaths. I'm just simply saying to you, if you, as a bearer of the reputation of God, say absolutely nothing more than yes, then mean yes, and keep your promise. I don't care what you're swearing by or who you're swearing by. Yes means yes. Do what you say you're going to do. And if you mean to not do it, then say no. Does that make sense? That's number 3. Keep your oaths. Keep your promises. Just none of this fudging your way out of your promises by dragging God's reputation into your broken promises. So in other words, the Lord says, a plain old simple yes, I will, in the mouth of a Christ follower is as good as a solemn oath. It's as good as a solemn oath. So here's just kind of a random application. The words, yes, honey, I will be home for dinner at 5:30. In the mouth of a Christ follower, in God's economy, is as good as, I swear by God, with heaven as my witness, I will be home at 5:30. That's what he's saying. An oath is an oath, Christ follower, if it's nothing more than a yes, I will. You say a yes, I will, mean a yes, I will, and do a yes, I will. Keep your oaths. Yes, son, I'll go out and play baseball with you on Saturday morning. Keep that oath. Somebody after first service said, here's a really good example of that. When you're talking to somebody and say, hey, would you consider doing this? And they say, well, I'll pray about that. Maybe we could just say, is that an oath? Are you really going to pray about it? Or do you actually mean to say, no, I have no interest. I have no interest in doing what you're asking me to do. But I'm not going to let my no be no, so I'm going to drag God into this. I'll pray about it. Kind of sounds like, Or how about this? This is really close to home. What if we're singing words like, Jesus, where you go, I'll go. Jesus, what you say, I'll say. Jesus, what you pray, I'll pray. Jesus, I will pursue you. I will pursue your presence. Those sound like oaths to me. I think God says, I truly hope you mean that. If you don't mean it, if you don't want to sing it, don't. You're probably better off not to sing it. I'm not going to promise that. I have no intention of pursuing Jesus, so I'm not even going to give lip service to a false oath. I'm just playing out some applications here. All right, let me quickly, as long as I'm going way too long here. Why is this such a big deal to God? Well, here's some interesting background that might help shed some light on the reason why it's so important. In ancient cultures, the names of rulers and the names of God were invoked with the meaning and the effect, hey, this is the God who rules here. This is the name of the God who rules. And so I am making to you a solemn oath and this solemn promise as earnest that I am going to do what I've said because this God whose name I've invoked in this oath rules in my life. Does that make sense? My God rules in my life, therefore my oath, in His name is good. And in the Egyptian culture, this is a point of fact from which the people of Israel had just been delivered, had just been given these 10 commandments. In the Egyptian culture, if you made a promise, if you made a vow, if you made an oath in the name of your God and you didn't do it, if you broke that vow, do you know what happened to you? They offed you. You were killed if you broke a promise in the name of your God. That's how serious promises were. And that's how seriously, promises were kept. All right, so make this connection with us. So God is saying to His people, hey, this practice, this is even more important with me because I am the true God. I am the real God. And when you invoke my name to say, I'll be there, I will do that. It's very serious. Because by keeping it, this is what you are saying, God rules in my life. When I keep my promises, it is evidence around me that Jesus rules in my life. The true God rules in my life. And so when we as Christ followers don't keep our promises, if we say we'll do it but we don't do it, if we say we'll be there but we're not there, it gives the Lord a bad reputation. It says to those around us, Jesus doesn't rule. Jesus doesn't rule. Jesus is a stinky God. I don't want to know Him. You see that? So here's a couple quick applications. One, make promises carefully. Make your promises carefully. Don't say yes if you don't mean yes. If you don't mean to keep it, don't say you will do it. Let your yes be yes, I will. Let your no be no, I won't. And you know what? We live in an age of flippant promises. We are constantly telling people, yeah, I'll be there. And we don't mean it at all. Even from the get-go, we don't mean it. With the result that I think we begin to relate to one another with the understanding that our words mean nothing. Our words mean absolutely nothing. And frankly, when we're on the receiving ends of those words, we don't even hold people to it because we don't even, embrace the fact that a yes should mean yes. It's like, oh, that's okay. Oath breaking is fine. You let me get away with it, I'll let you get away with it. God says, you know what? I don't like it when it's in my name. I won't let that go on. So make your promises carefully. Keep your promises diligently. Because, as I said before, your fulfilled promises demonstrate to others that Jesus rules in your life. Make sense? All right, one last quick application and we'll call it quits. You tell me how this oath sounds. I pledge myself to you alone, through thick and thin, through better, through worse, richer, through poorer, No matter what, till the day I die. Listen to this. I swear it to God. I swear it to God that I will love you and you alone till the day I die. With heaven as my witness, I swear it. Does that sound like an oath? Does that sound like an invocation of the name of God? You bet your life that is an oath. Listen to this, married people. When you break that promise, God says, I can't let that go. I can't let that go. Number 3, life goes better when I take God seriously. Life goes better when I take God's reputation seriously. Life goes better when I take God's presence seriously. Life goes better when I take my promises seriously. All right, let's stand.